Part 2. The Forest Forgets. To leave Ederwild is to forget it. To remember it is to lose something else instead. It had been 6 months since Ben disappeared. The house he'd lived in sat empty, though the rent had never lapsed. His mailbox stayed unlocked, and no one claimed the pale envelope that always reappeared there at night, no matter who removed it during the day. But tonight, it arrived somewhere else. In the apartment of Mara Renshaw, freelance archivist and part-time dream cartographer. She didn't remember requesting mail. She didn't remember ever hearing of Ederwild. But the letter sat on her kitchen table nonetheless, unmarked by post, its edges warm to the touch, as though just written. The wax seal bore a strange symbol, a sun with an eye in the center. Mara stared at it for an hour before opening it. Inside, no address, no signature, just a single line. We remember you. Come back. And below that, a name she hadn't heard in years. A name she wasn't supposed to remember. Benjamin Ashcroft. She gasped, not because it startled her, but because her mind offered up a memory she didn't know she had. A boy on a rocking horse. A hallway with disappearing doors. A house that folded inside itself. She sat back. The letter folded itself again, crisp and purposeful, as if preparing to leave her hand. And then the lights in her apartment dimmed. Not flickered, dimmed, like a curtain pulled from reality. Something was unwriting her surroundings. The floor beneath her became pine needles. The wallpaper twisted into vines. The ceiling dissolved into sky. Mara was still in her apartment, but also somewhere else entirely. She was going back. Not by train, not by plane, but by memory. And somewhere in the distance, buried in fog and soil, Ederwild stirred again. Not because Ben had left, but because someone else remembered. And this time, the forest had forgotten to stay quiet. Pushpin Chapter 2. The Map That Drew Itself. Coming next. Ban Muon Min Teep Tuc Nai Chuang Tu Kong. Hope Can Hin on /voice prompt Cho Part 2 Nai. Mara awoke with dirt under her nails. Her apartment was gone. No trace of it remained. She lay in the middle of a narrow path. Pine needles matted beneath her, the scent of damp earth clinging to her skin. Fog curled low to the ground, hugging the forest like a secret. She wasn't alone. Something whispered her name, not aloud, not even in her ears, but in her bones, like a memory that hadn't yet happened. Mara. She turned. Nothing. The woods stretched in all directions. Every tree looked familiar, yet impossibly wrong, leaning slightly toward her, as if listening. And then she saw it. A sheet of parchment, pinned to a nearby tree with a nail that looked rusted and wet. The paper was curled at the edges, old but breathing. As she stepped closer, it shimmered, lines appearing one by one, as if drawn by an invisible hand. A map, and at the center, glowing faintly red, was a symbol, the same one from the letter's wax seal. But this time, it bore a name beneath it. Ashcroft House. Her heart skipped. She hadn't remembered that name until this moment. And now, she could see its outline. Not on the map, in her mind. Every step she'd taken down its hallways. The mirror that showed too much. The crib in the memory nursery. She looked down again. The map had changed. It was drawing a line, a path, from where she stood. And it was still moving. Mara took a breath. She traced the red line with her finger. It led through a section labeled, "The Pines That Lie," and beyond that, "The Chapel of Returning." But what stopped her cold was the final annotation, written in red ink. No memory beyond this point. As she stared, her skin began to itch. Not from outside, but within, as though her body was forgetting something her soul still remembered. A name. A face. Ben. She clutched the map to her chest and turned toward the forest trail, now pulsing gently beneath her feet. Something in the soil was leading her, and every tree ahead seemed to lean just slightly away, clearing a path. She walked. Branches receded. Shadows blinked. And far behind her, pinned to the tree, the map she'd taken reappeared. A new copy already forming, already ready for the next one to arrive. The forest does not remember you, but it will guide you. Until you do. The trees here were not dead. They were pretending. Mara stepped lightly across the path, guided more by instinct than sight. The air shimmered in odd places, like the haze above asphalt on a summer day. Only this wasn't heat. It was memory distortion, bending the world just enough to confuse the senses. And the pines? They whispered. Not with wind. There was no wind. But with echoes. Familiar voices, speaking lies she almost believed. You've been here before, Mara. You were born here. You never left. She shook her head, clutching the map tighter. It had changed again. The path had grown longer. The chapel was farther away. She turned it over. On the back, scribbled in hurried ink, was a message that hadn't been there before. Do not trust the trees. They mimic memory. The ground beneath her feet was soft, too soft, like walking on old carpet soaked in rain. Each step made a faint sucking noise. Roots writhed just beneath the surface, rearranging with every footfall, making the trail feel circular. She stopped, closed her eyes, listened, and then, in the silence, she heard him. Mara, behind you. Her breath caught. Ben's voice. Exactly as she remembered it. But deeper, more hollow. She turned. Nothing. Just the trees, unmoving, unblinking, unspeaking. But one of them was shaped like a person. Not carved. Not sculpted. Grown that way. A pine tree, no taller than her, with a trunk shaped like a man mid-scream, arms raised, mouth stretched open in agony. Its bark was rippled, like muscle, and where the eyes should have been, the wood pulsed faintly red. A second tree stood beside it, smaller, curled inward, and then a third, dozens, hundreds. A grove of human-shaped trees, each captured in the moment of loss, and all of them facing her. The voice came again. You belong here, Mara. Just stop moving. We'll make room. The roots shifted beneath her. The map burst into flame in her hands. She dropped it, screaming. It didn't burn to ash. It burned to dust, like powdered memory. And from within the cloud, a figure stepped forward. A woman in a white dress. Long black hair. No face. Only the suggestion of one. She didn't walk. She floated, just inches above the forest floor. And in her outstretched hand, she held a new letter. Unopened. Sealed in red wax. The same symbol. Mara took it. Her fingers trembled as she broke the seal. Inside. You're close now. But the chapel doesn't forgive. Only the pines forget. If you want the truth, give something in return. And beneath it, a signature. M. Ashcroft. For the first time in years, Mara cried. Not from fear. Not from confusion. But because she realized something horrifying. She wasn't here to find Ben. She was here to replace him. The chapel wasn't built. It was grown. Mara stood before it, heart thudding in rhythm with the earth beneath her. The structure loomed out of the forest floor, not made of wood or stone, but bone-white trees braided into spires, their tips piercing the mist-thick sky. No doors. No windows. Just a single archway, shaped like an open mouth. Above it, etched in bark. All who remember, return. She clutched the letter signed by M. Ashcroft. The ink hadn't faded, but it felt heavier now, like it didn't want her to go in. She stepped inside. Instant cold. Not the kind that bites the skin, the kind that steals memory. The moment she passed through the threshold, she forgot her sister's name. A second step, her apartment in Boston blurred into something else. By the third, she couldn't remember if she'd ever lived outside Ederwild. The chapel wasn't a place. It was a filter. And at its center stood a pulpit of roots twisted into a lectern, behind which hovered an impossible thing. It looked like Ben, but it wasn't. His eyes were hollow, pupils like spinning black holes. His hands, too long, too thin, rested calmly atop the pulpit. When he spoke, it sounded like every version of him at once. You shouldn't have come back, Mara. She stepped forward, voice shaking. You called me. The figure smiled. We did. Then another voice. Her voice, whispered from behind her. And now, we can forget you properly. She turned. No one there. The chapel had closed behind her. The archway was gone. And now, so was her reflection in the polished root floor. The Ben thing gestured, and the space between them changed. The chapel unfolded, like pages flipping backward through time. She saw a boy, wide-eyed, drawing towns that never existed. A forest watching itself. A woman kneeling beside a crib made of bones, singing a song that rewrote names. Letters flying from trees like leaves, addressed to people who'd never lived. Ederwild remembers what the world discards, he said. It holds grief, collects the broken, and feeds on the names we forget. Mara felt her own name drifting from her lips. A taste of copper filled her mouth. She was being rewritten, but even through the disorientation, she remembered the letter. The offer. If you want the truth, give something in return. She pulled the paper from her coat and read it aloud. At the final word, the figure flinched, as though the truth wasn't for her, but a curse returned to its sender. The room exploded into sound. Memories, real and false, rained down like hail. Her first kiss under a hollow tree. Her mother calling her Marisol, not Mara. A school that taught her dreams could be archived. And Ben, always Ben. But his face now shifted, too many versions of him competing to exist. She screamed. The roots reached for her, grabbing not her body, but her name. And in that moment, she made a choice. Take everything, she whispered. But leave me the truth. The chapel went silent. The air burned white. And when she opened her eyes, she was standing in a town square. Sunlight. Blue sky. The sign beside her said, "Welcome to Ederwild. Population, remembered." And behind her, the chapel was gone. Only a letter in her hand remained. The town wasn't abandoned. It was waiting. Mara stood motionless at the edge of the town square. A thin breeze slid past her skin, unnaturally cold despite the golden morning light. The buildings were clean, unbroken, but wrong. Every window reflected the same cloudy sky, regardless of angle. Every door had a number, but none in sequence. And the people, yes, there were people, moved in slow, synchronized loops. A woman feeding pigeons that never landed. A man sweeping steps that never had dust. Children chasing a ball that never bounced. It was like a memory stuck on repeat. The letter in Mara's hand vibrated gently. She unfolded it. Dear resident, welcome back to Ederwild. Your presence has been archived. Please proceed to the registry for restoration. The curators. The word restoration made her stomach turn. Restore what? Her name? Her purpose? Or something the town needed from her? She walked. As she passed each building, a new sensation swept over her. Not nostalgia, but déjà vu corrupted. She remembered living in the yellow house at the corner. She remembered burying a cat that never existed. She remembered a fire that took nothing but still left scars. None of it had happened. But the grief was real. The registry stood at the end of a cul-de-sac, surrounded by trees shaped like quill pens. Its exterior was smooth, like glass that had forgotten how to reflect. Inside, a single desk. And behind it, a woman with no face. Her head was smooth porcelain. Her mouth didn't move, but her voice came from everywhere. Name? Mara hesitated. I don't know. The porcelain woman tilted her head. Accepted. She stamped a card and slid it forward. Mara read it. Resident ID, 072, memory level, partial, function, witness. Beneath it, a phrase burned into the paper. To see is to serve. She turned to leave. But there was no door, just a mirror. And in the mirror was not her reflection, but Ben, screaming behind glass, pounding with bloodied fists. She reached toward him, but the image fractured. A ripple. Then, a voice behind her. A voice she knew. I told you not to come back. She turned. A boy, no older than 12, stood in the registry's doorway. His eyes were black, not from corruption, but from depth. They gave you the role of witness, he said. That's what you get for remembering me. Who are you? I'm what Ben became, he said softly. And I'm not allowed to leave. Outside, the wind picked up. The town clock struck 13. And across the square, every door opened at once. From each, a letter drifted out, carried by wind that smelled like old books and burned names. Mara didn't catch hers. She didn't need to. The town had already written it into her skin. And beneath her coat, something began to grow along her back. Ink like roots, curling, spelling something in a language she couldn't read, but somehow understood. We are all pages. Some of us just forgot we were written. There was no night in Ederwild. The sky dimmed, sure, but it never went dark. Instead, it turned a deep, bruised gray, the color of old paper left in rain. And with that shade came the children. Not the ones chasing the ball. These were different. Mara first saw them near the edge of the cemetery. Tiny figures, motionless, heads tilted at unnatural angles. They didn't blink. They didn't breathe. But they watched. They always watched. She followed them. Something about the way they moved, not walking, but skimming, like weightless thoughts, tugged at the back of her mind. A memory. Or a dream. No, a dream someone else had once given her. They led her to a broken gate beside the woods. The map she no longer carried pulsed faintly in her bones. She was off path now, moving into a space not meant for residents. Beyond the gate was a clearing, and in the center, rising from the ground, was a playground. But it wasn't built. It was grown, like the chapel. Slides made of smooth, calcified bark, swings woven from tendon vine, a merry-go-round of bone and brass. And around it, the children circled, silent, waiting. One of them stepped forward. A girl. Her eyes were stitched shut with silver thread. Her voice was the sound of pages being erased. You shouldn't be here, but you're the only one who can remember us. Mara knelt slowly. Who are you? We're the pages that got torn out, the girl said. The people Ederwild never let finish. She touched Mara's hand, and in that instant, a flood of images. A man who was never born, but still died in the war. A mother who miscarried a daughter, but still dreamed of her voice. An architect who designed Ederwild in sleep, then forgot how to speak. All of them. Unwritten people. But the forest remembered. Why me? Mara whispered. Because you were almost one of us. The girl pointed to Mara's spine. She felt it, a strange warmth spreading beneath the skin. And then the whisper came again, deep in the marrow. You were meant to be forgotten. Suddenly, click. The merry-go-round stopped. The sky turned violet, and the playground's center split open, revealing a staircase made of roots, descending into blackness. The stitched girl spoke once more. If you want to find Ben, or what's left of him, you'll have to go where we're not allowed. Where's that? Beneath the writing room. As Mara stood, preparing to descend, she looked back. The children were gone. Only shadows remained. Shadows and the unmistakable scent of ink. There were no steps, only descent. The roots bent beneath Mara's feet, soft and warm, like something alive, but barely breathing. The staircase spiraled downward with no sense of end. The farther she went, the more time unraveled. She could no longer tell how long she'd been walking. Her watch ticked backward. The glow from above faded, replaced by a golden pulse rising from below. And when she reached the bottom, the air changed. It no longer smelled of pine or ink. It smelled like parchment burned in ritual, a dryness that coated the lungs, as though every breath she took was erasing a part of her. Before her stood a vast stone door. Etched across it were hundreds, no, thousands, of names. Some she recognized. Old teachers, forgotten friends. Some were her own, but they were crossed out. And beneath them, a new line waited, unfilled. The door opened on its own. The room beyond was neither large nor small. It simply was, an impossible space carved out of the living forest, held together by intention, not architecture. At its center sat a single desk. A man in a charcoal coat hunched over it, writing with a quill that bled. He didn't look up. You're late. His voice was like dry paper tearing in half. Mara stepped closer, cautiously. What is this place? This is the room where names are given, he said, dipping his quill again. This is where the town begins. You mean where people are born? He shook his head. No, where they are written. He turned the page toward her, and she saw something impossible. Her own life. Every choice, every moment, rendered in perfect, elegant script, written before she'd lived them. Even now, as she stood silently, new lines were forming. Her thoughts, her doubts, her fear. You were never supposed to see this, the man said. You were disrupting the pattern. I was led here. The children. He slammed the book shut. The ones who were never born, he muttered. They slipped through the seams. Why me? She asked again, trembling. Why not someone else? He leaned back in his chair. His face was blank, unfinished, as if still being drawn. Because you were a story paused mid-sentence, he said. Your parents left town. The forest couldn't finish writing you. You should have faded. But something brought you back. Mara felt a sudden weight on her chest. Ben resisted his edit. He remembered too much. So he was relocated. Where? The man pointed upward. Above this room is the forest. Below. He tapped the floor. The archive. Suddenly, the floor shifted. Roots curled up from the stone, forming letters beneath her feet. Words written in a language she couldn't speak, but that her bones recognized. The man sighed. You've been selected. For what? He opened another book, smaller, older. Inside was a blank page. Just one. He held the quill out to her. Every story ends, he said. But some get to choose how. You want me to write? Only your name. But write it as you remember it. If you lie, the forest will know. Mara took the quill. Her hand shook. She didn't write Mara. She didn't write Marisol. She wrote Mara Ashcroft. The moment the ink touched paper, the room roared. Walls peeled back like old wallpaper, revealing a sea of floating letters. Millions of them, each glowing, spinning, reshaping. She screamed. And then, silence. When she opened her eyes, the desk was gone. The man was gone. She stood in the middle of a library of impossible architecture, staircases floating in midair, books flying like birds, memory fragments drifting between shelves. She was in the archive, and behind her, stitched into her coat, a new word had appeared. Narrator. The archive did not sleep. It breathed. Mara stood frozen beneath a vaulted sky made not of stone, but script. Millions of words forming constellations that shifted as she looked at them. The air pulsed gently, like the lungs of a slumbering god inhaling the dust of forgotten centuries. Each wall towered into infinity, lined with shelves stacked not just with books, but with lives. Tiny glass vials that shimmered with memory. Stacks of documents written in bloodless ink. And boxes sealed in red wax, whispering softly whenever she neared them. You don't belong here, a voice murmured. She turned, startled. A figure emerged from between the shelves. A man in a scholar's robe, but his eyes were mirrors. Only the archivists walk freely. Then I'm lost, Mara said quietly. But I think I was meant to be. The man tilted his head. You carry a title now. Narrator. That's dangerous. Why? He stepped closer, his shadow detaching from his body and slithering ahead of him. Because narrators don't read the archive. They write into it. He waved a hand. A corridor of books twisted open behind him, like a wound. Follow me. If you want to find Ben, or whatever's left of him, you'll need to know how this place feeds. They walked. Each step echoed strangely, like the floor remembered every footfall that had ever crossed it. The archive holds every version of every story, the man explained. But Ederwild is special. It doesn't just preserve memory, it consumes it. Mara passed a floating scroll and felt a cold rush in her chest. It was her, a version of her that had drowned at age 6. A version that never reached the forest. A version that never found the letter. She turned away. How do I find the real Ben? The man stopped. He gestured to a massive door, shaped like a pupil. It blinked once, slowly. He's in the restricted stacks. But no one goes there without contribution. What kind of contribution? The man looked at her with something like pity. A memory. A true one. One that defines you. You give it to the archive, and it gives you passage. Mara hesitated. And then she remembered the hospital hallway. Her mother's voice, hoarse, barely human, saying, he didn't wake up. She hadn't cried. She hadn't spoken. But the memory had cut her in half. She reached into herself and offered it. The archive shivered. The door opened. Inside was nothing but fog. A whispering fog, thick and electric. Her name dissolved from her lips the moment she stepped in. Who am I? No one answered. Only the floor remained, carved with the same symbol as before. And then she saw him, sitting on a broken bench of bone and paper, his back to her. Ben. He didn't turn. You shouldn't have come. They said you remembered too much. That you were rewritten. I was, he said. And when he finally turned, his face was every version of him she'd ever known. Friend, brother, lover, stranger, all layered atop one another, shifting like pages in a storm. Ederwild doesn't want witnesses, he said softly. It wants endings. Then we give it one. Together? She nodded. He took her hand. The archive pulsed once, then opened wider than it ever had. They walked in silence. The restricted stacks loomed before them, an impossibly tall corridor of obsidian shelves stitched together with silver wire. It was colder here, not by temperature, but by memory. Every breath they took felt like a name they were forgetting. Every step they made sank slightly, like walking through regret. Ben broke the silence first. Do you remember the pond behind the house? Mara nodded. We called it the Eye. It wasn't a pond, he said. It was a gate. A gate they closed when we left Ederwild the first time. Mara stopped. We've been here before. He turned to face her. Not just once. Not just us. He pointed to the wall beside them. Faded inscriptions glowed faintly. Mara Ashcroft, witness. Benjamin Ashcroft, nullified. Evelyn Renshaw, erased. Thomas Renshaw, original source. Our names are written, he whispered. Written and rewritten. Mara felt the air shift around her. Behind one of the shelves, a soft sound began to rise. Not breathing, rustling, pages moving. Then a scream. Not human, not animal. Paper screaming. Ben grabbed her hand. Run. They bolted through the corridor as the shelves began to twist, unwrapping like ancient scrolls. Ink bled from the cracks, forming shapes, vague, humanoid, but incomplete. Creatures made from abandoned drafts of people. Thoughts that were started but never finished. A woman with no spine, walking backwards. A child with 3 mouths, all whispering, "Edit me." A man made entirely of question marks. They reached a chamber at the end of the hall. In its center floated a massive tome, bound in skin that looked disturbingly familiar. The air around it trembled, like language held at gunpoint. The book that bleeds. Ben stepped forward. This is it. The beginning and the end. Of what? Of Ederwild. He reached out, and the book opened itself. A stream of voices escaped, screaming not in pain, but in warning. Do not finish this sentence. To read is to become. This is the cost of authorship. And then, on the final page, a drawing. 2 figures. A boy and a girl, standing before a burning forest. Above them, the words, "Narrators become fuel." The moment Mara read it, her skin burned with ink. Veins across her arms began to spell phrases in a language older than breath. Ben collapsed, convulsing. The book drank his blood as it spilled. And Mara screamed not from pain, but realization. This whole place, Ederwild, it's not a town. It's a story engine. And we're the plot. Then the book closed. On its cover, one word now glowed. Rewrite. The archive shook. Shelves collapsed like dominoes made of grief. Paper birds burst from the rafters, screaming in forgotten tongues. And at the center of it all, the book that bleeds pulsed, open, alive, and demanding. Mara stood alone. Ben's body lay curled beside her. Not lifeless, but paused, like a sentence that had lost its punctuation. His blood was gone from the floor. So was his shadow. She didn't scream. She opened the book again. The pages were blank. No, not blank, waiting. The ink had pooled into the margins, trembling like it feared her touch. At the top of the first page, a phrase appeared. Begin where the story failed. Mara's hands moved on their own. The quill was already in her fingers. She dipped it in nothing, yet it came out wet with possibility. She wrote, "The forest was never meant to forget." The walls folded back. A new path opened before her, not carved in wood or root, but in narrative. Every step she took now created. Trees bloomed from metaphor. Shadows bent with tension. Wind whispered in exposition. And ahead of her, through the fog, something stood waiting. It wasn't a creature. It wasn't a building. It was a mirror, carved from obsidian, 12 feet high. Its surface shimmered with stories too old to remember. As Mara approached, her reflection began to change. First, herself. Then, herself as a child. Then herself as someone else. A girl who had never left. A girl who had become the forest. "You are the rewrite," the mirror said. Mara touched its surface and fell through it. She awoke in Ederwild. But not her Ederwild. The town was new, fresh, unwritten. Houses sat half-formed. Streets stopped mid-turn. People walked backward through time, speaking in drafts of dialogue. And above it all, floating where the chapel once stood, a pen, 12 feet long, suspended in the sky. Dripping ink that rained down on the town like prophecy. Mara knew what to do. She climbed the bell tower at the center of the unfinished town. Each step she took etched reality below. Time bent to her narrative. When she reached the top, the wind greeted her by name. Narrator. She raised her hand. The ink gathered. A page materialized before her. She wrote, "Ben never left. Ben remembers. Ben is not the plot. Ben is the author beside me." A tremor. A gasp. The town exhaled, and Ben stood at the edge of the square, whole, bleeding ink, but alive. He smiled, and in that moment, Mara understood. They weren't there to escape Ederwild. They were there to remake it. The forest around them began to change, no longer devouring memory, but preserving it, allowing it, giving it room to breathe. The chapel rebuilt itself with vines of truth. The children returned, whole and laughing. The mirror shattered, not in destruction, but liberation. And in the final line of the final page, Mara wrote, "The story forgets no more.